She was burning alive inside that car. Her husband stood outside telling the police officer, not once but 3 times, that he was alone, that no one else was in the vehicle but Claire Morris was in there, unconscious, drugged, trapped, and Malcolm Webster, her husband of just 8 months, watched as the flames consumed her. For 17 years he got away with it, the perfect murder. But here's what makes this case truly terrifying. Claire wasn't his first victim, and she wouldn't be his last. Before we dive into this chilling case, I want you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a case from Cold Crime Cases. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? I love hearing from our community around the world. Drop your location below, and if you're a genuine true crime lover who wants to help keep others safe, I've written something specifically for you. My book, True Crime Survival Guide, How to Stay Safe in a Dangerous World, is designed especially for women who want to protect themselves. You'll find the link in the description and pinned comment. Get your copy today because knowledge could save your life. Now, let's get into this devastating story. The funeral. Picture this: a funeral in Aberdeen, Scotland, May 1994. 2 men stand side by side, both weeping openly. One of them is Peter Morris, who has just lost his beloved sister, Claire. The other is Malcolm Webster, Claire's husband, wearing a neck brace, tears streaming down his face. Peter would later recall that moment with haunting clarity. He was actually squeezing my hand. Most people had their heads down, and I glanced at him, and he was full of tears as I was. That convinced me, right up until 3 years ago, that he had lost his wife in an accident. Then Peter's voice would crack as he added the devastating truth. In reality, I was holding the hand of her murderer. Can you imagine that? Comforting the very person who killed someone you loved. The betrayal, the manipulation, the pure evil it takes to stand there, fake tears in your eyes, playing the grieving husband while you know exactly what you did. The making of a monster. Malcolm John Webster entered this world on April 18, 1959, in Wandsworth, London. On paper, his family looked respectable. His father, Alexander Webster, was a detective chief superintendent in the Metropolitan Police, heading up the fraud squad. His mother, Odette Blewett, had been a nurse. But something was wrong with Malcolm from the very beginning. As a child, he would fake fainting spells just to get attention. He started fires, so many that people who knew him gave him a nickname, Pyro. Think about that. A child so obsessed with fire that everyone around him recognized it as his defining characteristic. As a teenager, Malcolm told people he had cancer. He didn't. He was manufacturing illnesses, seeking sympathy, learning how to manipulate everyone around him. This wasn't just a troubled kid. This was someone developing the skills of a predator. Malcolm left school at 15 with no qualifications. He drifted through jobs: nurse, bin man, driver, office clerk. Nothing stuck. Nothing mattered. He had a favorite saying that perhaps revealed more than he ever intended. Why work hard yourself when someone could be doing it for you? Remember those words. They're the key to understanding everything that came next. The children. In 1989, at age 30, Malcolm got a job at Tawem Hospital in Abu Dhabi, working on the children's ward. Within 6 months, 3 children, all under the age of 6, died of cardiac failure while under his care. Let that sink in. 3 bobbies. Cardiac failure in children that young is extraordinarily unusual. It doesn't just happen. Bate Brown, a former colleague, would later make a chilling statement. Supervisors discovered Webster had been injecting himself with insulin. They formed the opinion that he had killed the children with insulin injections. But here's the infuriating part. There was insufficient evidence for a police investigation. It's alleged that Malcolm's father, remember, a high-ranking police officer, used his influence to extract his son from the UAE before any charges could be filed. No action was ever taken. Some investigators would later theorize something absolutely horrifying. Webster had used these children as guinea pigs, testing doses for future crimes. He was practicing, perfecting his method, on Bobbies. Claire Morris. Every time someone scrolls past, another woman's suffering fades into silence. Don't let that happen. Subscribe and make her story matter. Malcolm returned to the UK, and in 1991, while working at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, he met Claire Morris. She was 32 years old, a nurse from Old Meldrum in Aberdeenshire. Her brother Peter's first impression of Malcolm. He seemed cheeky and roguish, intelligent, pleasant and caring. Claire was besotted with him. But mothers know things, don't they? Claire's mother, Betty, sensed something was wrong from the start. She found him strange. There was something about Malcolm Webster that didn't sit right with her. That maternal instinct was screaming danger, but what could she do? Her daughter was in love. On September 3, 1993, Malcolm and Claire married. Almost immediately, and I mean within days, Claire's health began to deteriorate, rapidly, dramatically. She became exhausted. She couldn't concentrate. She became entirely dependent on Malcolm for her daily care and well-being. What Claire didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that her husband was drugging her, every day. Temazepam, a benzodiazepine sedative. He was a nurse. He had access, and he was systematically poisoning his wife. Just one day before she died, Claire told her friend Leslie Roberts something that breaks my heart every time I think about it. "I'm not right. I'm tired, and I can't concentrate." She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know what or who. The rehearsal. A few weeks before Claire died, Malcolm did something that reveals just how calculated and cold-blooded he really was. He staged what appeared to be a practice run. He drove their car into a ditch, not a serious crash, just enough to test how it would look, how it would feel, how believable it would be. He was rehearsing her murder. The murder. May 27, 1994. Just 8 months after their wedding, Malcolm put his plan into action. The location was carefully chosen, the Auchenhuiv to Tarves Road near Mill of Kingoody, Aberdeenshire, a remote stretch of road, quiet, isolated, no witnesses. Malcolm drugged Claire with temazepam until she was unconscious. He drove to this remote location and parked the car near a tree. Then he did the unthinkable. He set the vehicle on fire with Claire still in the passenger seat. An off-duty policeman happened upon the scene and stopped to help. Malcolm told him there was no one else in the car. The officer asked again. Malcolm repeated he was alone. The officer asked a third time. Again, Malcolm assured him no one else was in the vehicle. Then the car exploded. Claire Morris burned to death while her husband stood outside, lying to the face of a police officer trying to help. Malcolm was taken to hospital for examination. Here's what's chilling. His pulse was normal. His heart rate was normal. His blood pressure was normal. Everything was textbook normal for someone who had supposedly just survived a horrific crash. The hospital concluded he was completely uninjured. But Malcolm claimed otherwise. At Claire's funeral, he wore a neck brace, playing the injured, grieving husband, standing beside Peter, both men crying, while Malcolm squeezed Peter's hand for comfort. The performance of a lifetime. If stories like this make you want to protect the innocent and expose the truth, then don't just watch. Subscribe. That single click could be the reason another story finally gets heard. The police investigation noted some suspicious elements, but here's where the system failed Claire. There were no skid marks at the scene. None. There was no crash damage on the vehicle. The car had been traveling slowly. It hadn't hit anything with force. Derek MacDonald, a firefighter who attended the scene, said something that should have triggered alarm bells. "We all thought it was a bit hooky. There was no sign of violence to the vehicle. For a car to be stopped or parked and burst into flames does not occur." Claire's friend Leslie Roberts also had concerns. She'd gone to Malcolm and Claire's cottage immediately after the crash to collect Malcolm's belongings to take to the hospital. On the table, she saw epilepsy drugs. Neither Claire nor Malcolm had epilepsy. Leslie was suspicious. She knew something wasn't right. At the funeral, Malcolm sobbed and seemed upset, but Leslie couldn't shake the feeling he'd had a hand in Claire's death. Leslie told the police her fears. They were dismissed. One officer did investigate in his spare time, on his own initiative in his own hours, because he had concerns. Claire had not been able to escape. The car had been traveling slowly. There was an absence of skid marks. But the death was ruled accidental. Malcolm Webster walked away, and he claimed over $200,000 from insurance policies. Within 6 months, he'd spent the entire amount. Land Rover Discovery, a yacht, gifts for other women he was pursuing. The perfect murder, or so it seemed. Felicity. In 1996, Malcolm met Felicity Drumm. She was an oncology nurse from Auckland, New Zealand. They met in Saudi Arabia, where both were working. She found him attentive and entertaining. On April 26, 1997, they married. Their honeymoon was spent at Cook's Beach on the Coromandel Peninsula in New Zealand. On the first night, Malcolm made Felicity a cup of tea. What happened next was extraordinary, and I want you to listen carefully to Felicity's own words. It was 36 hours before I woke up again. I had no explanation for it. Malcolm is all about control. 36 hours from one cup of tea. There was another incident during the honeymoon. After Malcolm brought breakfast one morning, Felicity experienced double vision and felt unwell. She slept for 18 hours. The drugging continued throughout their marriage, and throughout Felicity's pregnancy. Think about that, drugging a pregnant woman, endangering not just her life but the life of their unborn child. Food tasted acrid and bitter. She experienced double vision. She felt drunk. She needed help to walk. Blood tests showed liver abnormalities. Their son, Edward, was born in November 1998. Edward suffered from severe eczema that cleared up within weeks after Malcolm left the family. The baby had been exposed to the drugs in utero. During their marriage, there were 3 house fires. September 1997, a fire at their cottage in Line of Skene, Scotland. January 1999, a fire at a property they were intending to buy in Takapuna, Auckland. Another fire at Felicity's parents' home. Malcolm had added his name to Felicity's bank account. Nearly all of the $140,000 New Zealand dollars she had saved, around $80,000 US, vanished. He told her he had cancer. He told her he had heart problems. All lies. And here's the kicker. He took out insurance policies on Felicity's life. 9 separate policies worth approximately $750,000. Attempt 1. If you're still watching and haven't subscribed, I'm honestly curious what's holding you back. Drop it in the comments. I actually want to know. The deadline for payment on a house they were buying in Auckland was February 12, 1999. Malcolm had been making excuses about why his money hadn't been transferred from Scotland to pay for it. That morning, they drove to the bank together. Malcolm was at the wheel of Felicity's Honda Accord. Suddenly, he claimed there was something wrong with the steering wheel. The car swerved across 2 lanes of the motorway, accelerating to 60 miles per hour, veering toward a power pole. Felicity grabbed the steering wheel. She found that it worked perfectly. The car ended up in a ditch. Webster immediately jumped out and opened the boot. Inside were newspapers and petrol. He screamed at Felicity repeatedly to stay in the car. She refused. She got out and phoned her lawyer to drive her to the bank. Malcolm faked a heart attack. While he was at the hospital, he cleaned out their joint bank account. Attempt 2. 1 week later, there was a second murder attempt. Malcolm and Felicity took a trip to a rural area north of Auckland. Felicity was driving. She drank from a water bottle. The next thing she remembered was waking up in the passenger seat, in a forest, when her phone rang. That phone call saved her life. When Malcolm returned to the car, he was furious. Listen to what he said. "What the hell are you doing awake?" Police later found petrol, wood, and newspapers in the boot. Felicity's father, Edward, discovered 9 forged insurance policies on Felicity's life. When Felicity confronted Malcolm about trying to kill her, his response was chilling, and I want you to really hear this. "You would have died happy." Not an apology, not a denial. You would have died happy. Let me ask you something, and this is for my genuine viewers who really think about these cases. What would you do if you were Felicity in that moment? You've just woken up unexpectedly in a forest. Your husband is furious that you're awake, and you're starting to piece together that he's been trying to kill you. Do you confront him? Do you run? Do you pretend you don't know? Tell us in the comments, because your answer might actually help someone who finds themselves in a similar situation. Recognizing danger and knowing how to respond could save a life. Felicity's escape. Felicity went to Takapuna police station and made a formal statement. Hair testing confirmed she had been drugged throughout her pregnancy. Malcolm fled New Zealand before charges could be filed. He took over $390,000 of Felicity's money with him, leaving her with just $12 in her bank account. In July 2000, 4 arrest warrants were issued in New Zealand for Malcolm Webster. 2 for arson, 1 for administering drugs, 1 for disabling a victim. New Zealand police tried for years to get Scottish police to arrest him. Initially, they were unsuccessful. Can you believe that? Multiple attempts to murder someone, clear evidence of drugging, fraud, arson, and he was walking free. More victims. This took me hours of painful research, reading autopsies, police files, and the cries of women that were ignored. If you felt safe watching from your screen, the least you can do is hit that red subscribe button. Malcolm Webster returned to Scotland. In 2002, he began a relationship with Simone Banarjee. She was a 41-year-old NHS manager in Oban. Simone was independently wealthy. Her father was a retired consultant surgeon with a trust fund. She owned a house. She had $50,000 in shares. She owned a 50% share in a 38-foot ocean-going yacht. Malcolm told Simone he had terminal chronic lymphocytic leukemia. He claimed he was undergoing chemotherapy. To make the lie convincing, he shaved his head. Simone changed her will, leaving everything to Malcolm. They planned a transatlantic sailing honeymoon. The route would take them from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean on her yacht. Police would later believe Malcolm intended a staged boating accident, drowning at sea. After his conviction, Simone discovered something absolutely terrifying. The foil on her life jacket had been punctured. "Everybody else's life jackets were fine," she said. "I have pretty much no doubt that the boat was the way it was going to go." In spring 2006, the Oban Angling Club reported that $4,000 was missing. Malcolm Webster had been the treasurer. The embezzlement investigation brought Malcolm to the attention of Detective Inspector Charles Henry. In June 2006, something happened that would change everything. Jane Drumm, Felicity's sister and a domestic violence expert, attended a police conference in Britain. She spoke to officers about her shock at discovering her sister had been in a road accident, an accident that seemed to mirror perfectly the tragic accident that had killed Malcolm Webster's first wife. 2 car crashes, 11,000 miles apart, 5 years apart, same pattern, same man. Jane Drumm went directly to a chief superintendent and demanded action. That conversation changed everything. The breakthrough. In 2007, police searched Simone Banarjee's house. They learned of the planned transatlantic yacht honeymoon. Detective Inspector Charles Henry became alarmed. Webster is a potential serial killer, and it was the ideal scenario for him, Henry said. Simone was in absolute danger. I was convinced she was going to be the next victim. Them sailing out into international waters absolutely horrified us. In January 2008, police issued an Osman warning to Simone Banarjee, an official warning that her life was in danger. The warning revealed that Malcolm had a wife and son. When Simone confronted him, she said, "He went absolutely white. He went very, very quiet. I wish I was not in the room. I have never seen him like that before." In March 2008, police announced they were re-examining Claire Morris's death. The investigation was called Operation Field. The breakthrough came from a tiny fragment of Claire's liver tissue that had been preserved in paraffin wax after the post-mortem in 1994. Scientists developed an innovative duexing technique that had never been needed before. They were able to extract and test tissue that was 14 years old. The result? A 92.4% probability that temazepam was present in Claire's liver. Claire had never been prescribed temazepam. Malcolm Webster, as a nurse at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, had access to it. This single piece of evidence transformed the case. The investigation was compared to Lockerbie in its complexity. It lasted 5 years. More than 1,000 people were interviewed. Over 1,200 pieces of evidence were collected. 90 search warrants were executed. Witnesses came from 6 countries. Detective Chief Inspector Phil Chapman and 5 colleagues spent a month in New Zealand. The FBI assisted in interviewing expatriates. 11 witnesses traveled from New Zealand to Scotland for the trial. Imagine if it was your daughter, your sister, or your friend. Would you want their story buried under noise or told with care? Subscribing helps make sure nobody's story fades away. Not ready to subscribe? That's okay, but at least tell me why in the comments. I want to learn from you. The trial began on February 1, 2011, at the High Court of Justiciary in Glasgow. It would last 16 weeks, the longest criminal trial with a single accused in Scottish history. The prosecution took 50 days to present evidence. The defense acknowledged Webster was a liar, a philanderer, a thief, and a ratbag, but not a killer. Key witnesses emerged. Ian Hardy testified he'd seen Webster at the crash site 11 days before the accident, scouting the location. Forensic investigator Andrew Wade said, "My first impressions were that it didn't look right." He concluded it was deliberate fire setting. Felicity described the 36-hour sleep, the drugged food, waking in the forest to Webster's fury. Peter Morris testified about holding Webster's hand at the funeral, both crying. "In reality," he said, "I was holding the hand of her murderer." On May 19, 2011, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty of murdering Claire Morris. Guilty of attempting to murder Felicity Drumm. Guilty of fraud, theft, arson, drugging, and attempted bigamy. Webster showed little emotion. On July 5, 2011, Lord Bannatyne sentenced Malcolm Webster to life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years, one of the longest jail terms ever imposed in Scotland. This was a murder which could properly be described as cold-blooded, brutal, and callous, the judge said. The motive was the utterly base one of financial gain. You have shown absolutely no remorse. I have formed the clear view you are a considerable danger to women. Peter Morris spoke outside court. For 17 years, it was the perfect murder. He got away with it for 17 years because he made it look like an accident. Webster appealed multiple times. All appeals were rejected. By February 2016, every legal avenue was exhausted. He's currently in HMP Shotts, Lanarkshire. He reportedly told inmates he expects to die in prison. He continues to maintain his innocence. He'll be eligible for parole in 2041, when he'll be 82 years old. Claire's family fought to replace her headstone, removing any reference to her marriage. Eventually, the council agreed. Webster was banned from being buried alongside her. In December 2019, Peter Morris died at the age of 56. He had campaigned tirelessly for justice for his sister. Malcolm Webster hunted wealthy women for nearly 3 decades. He drugged them, set fires, staged crashes, all for money. He was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. A police profiler labeled him a sociopath. Claire Morris was 32 years old when she died. A nurse, a daughter, a sister. She deserved better than 8 months of marriage before her husband murdered her for money. Before you go, I want to remind you about my book again, True Crime Survival Guide, How to Stay Safe in a Dangerous World. It's especially designed for women, with practical advice on recognizing danger, protecting yourself, and staying safe in situations that could turn deadly. The link is in the description and pinned comment. Get your copy today. If this case affected you the way it affected me, hit that like button, subscribe to Cold Crime Cases, and share this video so Claire's story reaches more people. Leave a comment below telling me your thoughts on Malcolm Webster. How did he get away with it for so long? What could have stopped him sooner? Until next time, stay safe out there. And remember, trust your instincts. Claire's mother knew something was wrong. Felicity's sister knew something was wrong. Listen to that voice. It might save your life.